All right. Good morning. Welcome back, everyone, to our water fluoridation investigation. So today I thought we would pick back up where we left off on the cease and desist that I sent to Henrico County. But before we jump into that, I want to update you on when Henrico County received the papers that I submitted to the court. For those of you who are just joining me, I sent Henrico County a cease and desist to stop water fluoridation or provide me the information as to the statutory authority and who is in charge of this water fluoridation program, who is responsible, who has decision-making authority to discontinue water fluoridation in Henrico County. I gave Henrico County more than 2 weeks, I believe, in order to respond before I then escalated the matter and took it to the courts. I filed a declaratory judgment, a request for an injunction, and a writ of mandamus, right? And so essentially, I'm asking the court to declare whether or not it's lawful for Henrico County to put fluoride in the drinking water. I am asking the court to, hopefully, the court will agree that Henrico County does not have the authority to do what they're doing. And so I'm asking them to do a permanent injunction and then a writ of mandamus in order to compel Henrico to provide pure water under the law. Now, if I get the first two, then the third, in my opinion, is automatic, because once you declare that it's not lawful to put fluoride in the drinking water, and then you do a permanent injunction to stop Henrico from putting it in the drinking water, by default, then Henrico County will be providing pure water as defined under the law. So Henrico County, I filed the papers with the court and I paid $12 to have the sheriff serve the documents on Henrico County. That way you have proof of this. It's something that satisfies the courts. It was very easy. And so I contacted the clerk and found out that Henrico County received the papers on May 14th, which means that they have 21 days to respond after they receive it. So I believe that would put it at June 4th. Henrico County has until June 4th in order to respond to this controversy. So I am waiting with bated breath. I now have a clear idea as to what they are going to argue, what the defense, Henrico County is the defense in this situation. And so I have a really good idea as to what they are going to how they're going to defend themselves. So it will be very exciting. I can't wait to see. There's a lot of people who are rooting for us. So with that being said, let's jump straight into the cease and desist where we left off. Okay, let's get into it. Okay, guys, we are picking back up on page 28. We have here the title, "The scope of VDH authority is limited to treating water, not people." This is very important, guys, because this is one of the tactics that they use. As of January 2026, the Virginia Department of Health is authorized to regulate water treatment additives, chemicals added to drinking water to ensure potability and safety only, such as disinfectants and corrosive control agents, but only as it relates to VDH's duty to ensure pure water. That is what VDH is limited to. We have here, VDH has never been granted authority to regulate, mandate, recommend, or approve additives for preventive healthcare purposes. This distinction is critical. So, what can VDH do? Additives used to remove or neutralize contaminations fall within VDH's authority. Additives introduced as a preventive medical treatment cannot. So again, additives used to remove, neutralize contaminations fall within VDH's authority. Additives introduced as a preventive medical treatment, they do not. Okay, folks? Fluoridation falls squarely into the latter category. Fluoride is defined as a drug per the FDA. The FDA refuses to regulate fluoride in the public drinking water. But that does not negate the fact that it is in fact defined as a drug. Okay, just because they don't want to take responsibility for the fluoride in the drinking water, that doesn't magically change the fact that it's a FDA defined drug. Fluoride is a medical treatment and cannot be put into the same box with other chemicals that are used to make water safe to drink, such as chlorine. Importantly, the FDA has recently banned and limited the sale of unapproved ingestible fluoride prescription drug products for children. And this was the FDA news release. It said FDA acts to protect children from unapproved fluoride drug products for immediate release. So they did, this was a press release. The fluoride in the public drinking water is also an unapproved drug. However, the FDA has refused to regulate it. So the same type of fluoride that goes into a single glass of water is the same type of fluoride that goes into our drinking water, right? Sodium fluoride is what's being put into a glass of water. Sodium fluoride is used still in a lot of localities. Richmond used to use sodium fluoride. It's a powder. Now they switched over to a cheaper product that's hydrofluorosilicic acid. So here we've got an image. We have the FDA. They are not allowing doctors to give out fluoride to children under 3, but at the same time, we have Henrico County giving fluoride to children under 3. It's ridiculous. Right here, we have an image of, this is the label for hydrofluorosilicic acid. Over here, we've got the directions for water fluoridation. Over here, they say they don't want to go over 1.5 parts per million. I don't know how anyone's going to control that. I don't think legally they can. We know that in the case of Richmond, more than a month's worth of hydrofluorosilicic acid went into the drinking water in 5 hours and 15 minutes. Mathematical calculations puts the concentration upwards of 114 parts per million. So this stuff is, very, very toxic. Over here, avoid contact with skin, eyes, mouth, and clothing. Avoid breathing fumes or vapor. This hydrofluorosilicic acid is one of the most dangerous things that the men have to handle. It eats through concrete. It eats through metal, and so what they do is they dilute it and then put it into your drinking water for your children to ingest. But this is in fact a poison, so they are just putting a small amount of this poison into the drinking water. So when people who are against fluoride call it a poison, it's not hyperbole. It is listed as a poison on the package. All right, so FDA classification. This is important because a lot of people want to say this is not a drug. This is legally defined as a drug. Fluoride is classified as a drug by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration when used for prevention or mitigation of disease. Accordingly, fluoridation of public water supplies for the purpose of reducing tooth decay as issue not related to waterborne pathogens can be viewed as a population-wide medical intervention. It absolutely is a population medical intervention, population-wide medical intervention. Modern public health practices generally emphasize targeted treatment and informed consent, right? Isn't it better to treat the individual instead of mass medicating? What a concept, right? So this is going to be 21 USC 321 definitions generally, and section B, G1 and B, says articles intended for use in diagnosis, cure, mitigation, treatment, or prevention of disease in man or other animal. So in other words, when you're putting hydrofluorosilicic acid in the water to treat tooth decay or prevent tooth decay, you are using it as a drug according to the FDA. Okay, now this is very important here. We have the Delaney Committee hearing. This is going to be in 1952. So Union Calendar number 787, Delaney Committee hearing 1952. The term mass medication, fluoridation program does constitute medication. And this is a quote straight out of the record from the hearing. It says 1952, since the question was raised at the hearing, the committee wishes to point out that fluoridation does constitute medication. Of course it does, folks. Anyone who says fluoride is not a medication is being dishonest with you, and that's when you know that they're corrupt and evil. The term drug is defined in part in section 201G of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act as articles intended for use in diagnosis, cure, mitigation, treatment, or prevention of disease in man or other animals. We just went over that. And articles intended to affect the structure or any function of the body of man or other animals. It is safe to say that fluoridation is mass medication without parallel in the history of medicine. Okay, that was the Delaney report. Says here that the historical record, including the 1952 Delaney Committee hearing, demonstrates that fluoridation has never been a scientifically settled, purely technical, or uncontroversial medical treatment. The fact that federal legislators debated its safety and debated bills restricting or limiting support for fluoridation, combined with the absence of clear enabling statutory language in Virginia, supports the legal argument that local governments lacks in unambiguous statutory grant of authority to add fluoride to drinking water absent expressed legislative approval. Okay, let's move on. All right, page 32, 1980, VDH, Virginia Department of Health reports doubts fluoridation safety. Okay, so this was 1980. In 1980, the Virginia Department of Health asked EPA toxicologist Brian Dementi, PhD, to review the available literature relating to the health effects of fluoride. Dementi concluded, okay, so this is the toxicologist, EPA toxicologist that VDH hired, and he says, and I quote, "With regard to fluoridation, this writer is of the opinion that the evidence of adverse health effects is of such magnitude, and humans being so varied in their individual constitution, such a state of health at any moment, eating and drinking habits, etc., that it is inappropriate to say that fluoridation is a totally healthful and safe practice for all." In other words, he acknowledged that this is not safe for everyone to consume. Okay, this is not good. public health risks, and federal rulings. All right, getting into the meat and potatoes. Water fluoridation can no longer be regarded as a valid public health measure. A federal court has determined that water fluoridation poses an unreasonable risk of injury, and the merits of that ruling stand. Fluoride is a well-established neurotoxin, and continuing its addition to public water places this practice squarely within the realm of child endangerment and child abuse. Okay, we know that this is a poison. The federal judge said it's an unreasonable risk of injury, poses an unreasonable risk of injury. The FDA has banned it for children under the age of 3, children at low and moderate risk. So I would imagine water fluoridation would constitute as child endangerment and child abuse, in my opinion. Okay, that's my opinion. I can have that opinion, folks. Henrico County has never disputed the risks of injury and harm to the public resulting from the deliberate addition of hydrofluorosilicic acid to the water. The county has produced, this is important, folks, this is how ridiculous this is. The county has produced no documents under FOIA or otherwise to support the purpose or justification for fluoridating the water supply, making this practice arbitrary and capricious. So I asked Henrico County, I did a FOIA request for the records to support water fluoridation. Henrico County said they don't have any documents to support for the purpose of water fluoridation. I asked, please provide me the documents relied upon for the purpose of water fluoridation. They responded back, we don't have any records. Provide me the documents for the justification of water fluoridation. They do not have any documents. When you do not possess any documents for the purpose, justification, or safety of water fluoridation, I believe this means that the practice is arbitrary and capricious. You've got no earthly idea why you're doing what you're doing. That, by definition, is arbitrary and capricious. But that's the controversy, folks. That's what we're going to have a judge figure out. The county's lack of knowledge regarding the FDA-defined drug, combined with its continued addition of fluoride, demonstrates a reckless disregard for the health and safety of its residents. Henrico has been repeatedly warned of the hazards associated with ingesting fluoridated water and has chosen to deliberately ignore these well-established risks. The county further exhibited deliberate indifference with more than a month's worth of fluoride entering the water system, exposing eastern Henrico to an unknown concentration of a toxic substance. The mathematical models indicates that the concentration may have reached over 114 parts per million. 114 parts per million is the concentration if the fluoride was equally distributed throughout Richmond, Hanover, Henrico, and Chesterfield. If, for example, Henrico got all of it, it would have been way, way higher than 114 parts per million. Okay, this is like best case scenario if it's diluted through all the localities. It could have even been worse than that. The monthly operating report said it was at 31.95 parts per million 2 days after the overflow. So that's their own documents that the health department signed off on, that the health commissioner signed off on. Okay. Henrico had the option to reject water fluoridation at both the Richmond and Henrico waterworks, but instead unlawfully opted into this chemical contaminant. The county relied on the ill-advised blessing of the health department, which continues to rely on outdated information and discredited dogma, despite being provided with the evidence that fluoride is a well-established hazard and an FDA-defined chemical drug causing adverse health effects. Approximately 22 states have moved to permanently ban the addition of fluoride, highlighting the serious nature of this contaminant. Governments are recognizing that it is unreasonable and unethical to deliberately expose the public to hazardous chemicals without consent. The waterworks should be about fresh, clean, safe drinking water, not serve as a mechanism for government prescribed medicine without the consent of the consumer. Henrico County has a duty of care to protect its residents, and by continuing this practice without lawful authority, ethical justification, which they're never going to overcome that because it's never ethical to use the public water to deliver medicine, or health merit, is engaging in public health malpractice. This term, public health malpractice, is what Joseph Ladapo, the Surgeon General for Florida, said. He, in his opinion, water fluoridation constitutes a type of public health malpractice. You're using a loophole, a government loophole, to bypass informed consent and doctors. I mean, if that's not corrupt, I don't know what is. And the fact that the Board of Supervisors, the county manager, John Vitulkas, the Department of Public Utilities Director, Bentley Chan, is protecting this scheme is outrageous, in my opinion. Okay, failure to protect. So picture the Board of Supervisors, the county manager, the DPU director, and the waterworks operators. They are failing to protect children. Henrico County is surreptitiously implementing water fluoridation by failing to disclose this practice to the public. The county's 2024 water quality report omits any reference to fluoride being intentionally added to the drinking water, despite monthly operating reports from the same period documenting that fluoride was in fact intentionally being added to the system. Taken together, these records indicate a material omission in the county's public reporting and raise serious questions about whether residents have been knowingly withheld accurate information regarding the contents of their drinking water. These facts further highlight the county's unethical and possible unlawful conduct. Okay, what do I mean by this? Forgive me. So, every year, Henrico is required under the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act to send out what's called a Consumer Confidence Report. Henrico County calls it a water quality report, but legally it's a consumer confidence report. And in 2024, they omitted the fact that the fluoride was in the drinking water. They know it's in the drinking water because they're the ones that put it in the drinking water. So the fact that they did not put it in that water quality report, or consumer confidence report rather, is very problematic. I believe that violates the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act. So let me show you what I mean. So this is going to be on the federal level, which is Title 40, Chapter 1, Subchapter D, Part 141, Subpart O. Okay, Subpart O is the Consumer Confidence Report. Some people call it the CCR. Again, Henrico calls it a water quality report. So this is going to be code 141.151, purpose and applicability of this subpart. And it says here, the subpart establishes the minimum requirements for the content of reports that community water systems must deliver to their customers. These reports must contain information on the quality of the water delivered by the systems and characterize the risks, if any, from exposure to contaminants detected in the drinking water in an accurate and understandable way. Is Henrico actually letting the public know that hydrofluorosilicic acid has been deemed to reduce IQ, damage your thyroid, make your bones harder but more brittle, bioaccumulate in your brain? No, they are omitting this information. So there are risks. It's well-established risks. The EPA acknowledges that there are well-established risks, and Henrico is withholding this information from the public. EPA's review of these documents identified consensus finding, consensus findings about health hazards. 2 children's health outcomes: tooth weakening, dental fluorosis, and developmental neurotoxicity, e.g. decreased intelligence, were identified as well-established and sensitive health effects associated with fluoride exposure. So essentially, the EPA is saying that the well-established hazards are dental fluorosis. So it doesn't deny this. The other well-established hazard is neurodevelopmental effects. Okay, in other words, it's going to dumb you down. Fluoride dumbs you down. Imagine ingesting small amounts of a poison dumbs you down. I mean, I think the people who put it in the drinking water, they must have been just guzzling this stuff because they're dumb as a box of rocks. Then we have skeletal fluorosis. It says, is less sensitive and not likely to drive toxicity values. That's absurd. When it causes dental fluorosis, it harms your bones. Idiots. There is insufficient evidence for cancer, and I disagree with that. There's a lot of evidence of cancer. Okay, let's move past government corruption and move on. Additionally, a federal court has determined that water fluoridation poses an unreasonable risk of injury, which puts water fluoridation squarely in the realm of child endangerment and child abuse, right? In my opinion, that is exactly what's going on. The merits of the judge's ruling stands, okay? And here's the lawsuit: Food and Water Watch versus United States Environmental Protection Agency, otherwise known as the EPA. Conclusions of law. Plaintiffs have proven by a preponderance of the evidence that water fluoridation at the level of 0.7 parts per million, this is the so-called optimal level that goes into your drinking water. I mean, really, they'll put 1 part per million, 1.5 parts per million, but this is the line that they tell the public. They say it's 0.7. It's never precisely 0.7. They can't control this. Anyway, let me start over. Forgive me, guys. Plaintiff has proven by preponderance of the evidence that water fluoridation at the level of 0.7 parts per million, the prescribed optimal level of fluoridation in the United States, presents an unreasonable risk of injury to health or the environment without consideration of cost or other non-risk factors, including an unreasonable risk to a potentially exposed or susceptible subpopulation under the conditions of use. Okay, now let's take a look at child endangerment. So let's look at a case. An injury may be an actual injury or a threatened injury. So when Henrico County puts hydrofluorosilicic acid into the drinking water and it threatens a child's brain and teeth and body, that is an injury, and they're also threatening additional injuries such as cancer. The threat of injury has been upheld by the courts. And anyone who says that putting small amounts of poison in the drinking water does not cause cancer is ridiculous. Okay, obviously it does. So it says the statutory definition of an abused or neglected child do not require proof of actual harm or impairment having experienced by the child. The term substantial risk speaks in futuro. I'm not sure how to pronounce this word. I should have checked. This isn't a word that I read often, so forgive me. Futuro, maybe. So, in other words, you don't have to wait until the child is completely jacked up to stop. Just the fact that it's risking harm is enough to constitute child abuse. In other words, if you give a child a beer to drink, you don't have to wait until the child gets, drinks to the point of blackout drunk. Just giving the child a beer constitutes child endangerment, okay? You don't have to wait until they're absolutely disfigured and jacked up. It doesn't work that way in America anymore, supposedly, except for when it comes with fluoride, because we got a loophole there. The Commonwealth's policy is to protect abused children and to prevent further abuse of those children. This policy would be meaningless if the child must suffer an actual injury from the behavior of his or her parent. The statute does not impose such trauma upon a child. Okay? This is in Virginia. This is how the courts see it in Virginia. You do not have to wait until the child is permanently damaged. We can do something before it. Just risking the child's brain health, dental health, bone health, that's all it takes. But that's the controversy, folks. That's what we're going to have a judge figure out. That's the controversy. So we've got 2026. This is the EPA. Okay. So to me, I don't know what the EPA is doing here by doing this assessment, but nonetheless, I put something on the record. Let's go ahead and read it. It says Human Health Toxicity Assessment, Preliminary Assessment Plan, and Literature Survey. So again, I have mixed feelings about what's going on here. There's always an agenda. EPA, now this is the reason why I wanted to include this, is because people are claiming that the EPA recommends water fluoridation. They do not. And VDH, under their primacy rule, they cannot recommend it. So I don't know what they're doing, because the Virginia legislature has never granted VDH the authority to recommend water fluoridation. Under primacy, I don't believe that they can recommend it, because whatever the EPA is forbidden from doing, then VDH, when they're wearing their little primacy hat, they are also forbidden from doing what they're doing. That's the way I view the situation. So it says EPA does not make recommendations on adding fluoride to drinking water, since Safe Drinking Water Act prohibits EPA from requiring the addition of any substance to drinking water for preventive healthcare purposes. The decision whether or not to add fluoride to drinking water is made on a state or local basis. There has to be a law, a state law, in order to do it, is what they're saying. And then, for example, if the state law says that the localities are authorized, then localities can pass an ordinance. Now, I would argue that you can no longer do this, get away with this, given the federal ruling and given that the FDA has barred doctors from giving fluoride to 3-year-olds. So if doctors are barred from giving fluoride to 3-year-olds, what kind of sense does it make for Henrico County to put it in the drinking water? It's absolutely absurd. Our country is corrupt. Our country, I believe that we have one country under blackmail. That's my opinion. The decision whether or not to add fluoride to drinking water is made on a state or local basis. EPA does not make recommendations on adding fluoride to drinking water. EPA does not want the responsibility. EPA does not recommend water fluoridation. Federal government is barred from recommending water fluoridation. EPA, okay? And so if the EPA is forbidden from recommending water fluoridation, then that means that primacy agencies are forbidden, in my opinion. I don't know how else you can see it. You know, they're the primacy agency. They have to do exactly what the EPA does. But I don't know. There are people in the same space as me that disagree with me on this issue. So we're not all in agreement on everything. Okay, here is some of the studies that was used in the court case. The EPA acknowledges that fluoride reduces your IQ. So they're not actually disputing this, okay? And this is the evidence, review of evidence presented in the fluoride lawsuit on the risk of fluoride neurotoxicity. People will say that there are no studies that fluoride causes harm under 0.7, or they acknowledge that 1.5 and above damages the brain, but people will say there's no studies showing that fluoride damages the brain under 1.5, and that's simply not a truthful statement. Right here, you can see this is the amount of fluoride, and so you can see clearly that under 0.7 parts per million, there are significant adverse effects, okay? So there are lots of studies here. So let's move on. Let's see. Yeah, here under water fluoridation level. So we have 0.25 parts per million, 0.31, 0.36, 0.43, 1.08. This one was null. 1.31. So, yeah, this one was null. 0.31 adverse effects. 0.36 adverse effects. And there's even more since then. This seemed to be an anomaly. All right, let's move on. You guys can go check out the information from the court case if you wish. Sorry, guys, I got a little distracted there. That's what happens. I'm a statistics girl, so you know I love looking at numbers. Okay, here we go. So, reasons to end water fluoridation. This is going to be a science-based assessment. I just grab the image because a lot of people don't understand what dental fluorosis is. Your teeth are made up of hydroxyapatite, and essentially what happens is the hydroxyl ion gets replaced with a fluoride ion, and then you wind up having fluoroapatite. Fluoroapatite starts discoloring your teeth, turns them yellow, stains them. You've got streaks, brown stains. And so this was an NHANES study that the CDC put out, I believe. Let's see. Was this an NHANES? Yeah, this was the NHANES 2015-2016 study. And so in America, only 13% of Americans have teeth that are unaffected. We have 16% of Americans that have questionable dental fluorosis. 58% of Americans have questionable dental fluorosis. 9.6% of Americans have mild dental fluorosis. 1.6% have moderate dental fluorosis. And 0.14% has severe dental fluorosis. Now, the harder your teeth get, the more brittle they get. So the more prone they are to cracking and breaking off. You have a lot of celebrities and, people who need to be in front of the camera, and they wind up spending a lot of money in order to cover up their dental fluorosis. You have people getting veneers, which are terrible for your teeth, but they need to cover this up. And so the dental industry is promoting something that damages the public's teeth, and then they create a problem in order to sell a solution. So here's the problem that they create: brown and yellow teeth. And then the solution that they sell are costly veneers and bleachings and so forth in order to get rid of the damage that was done. So this is what you would call a scheme, folks. This is a scheme. This is corruption. When you smile, you can literally see the government's work. And to me, the analogy that I used is, this is like branding cattle on a farm. The government is literally branding us like cattle, okay? It's a very sick thing that Henrico County is doing, that the waterworks operators are doing, that Bentley Chan, the DPU director, is doing, that the Board of Supervisors and John Vitulgas, the county managers, that's doing. They are damaging your child's health and your child's teeth. They're literally changing your teeth, artificially changing your teeth to make them brown and yellow. It's egregious. So if 58% of the U.S. has dental fluorosis, this is from a particular age group. I can't remember the age group. You'd have to click on the link. But this means this is it's reason you can extrapolate that to Henrico. That means 58% of folks that live in Henrico have dental fluorosis that's mild. They have yellow teeth. And people then shame those citizens and say, well, you just didn't brush your teeth enough. No, it's from the poison that you're putting into the drinking water. So they blame the victim. They literally blame the victim and say, you're dirty, you're unhealthy, you don't brush your teeth, when they're the ones actively damaging your teeth. I find this to be criminal. I do not understand how this is lawful in Henrico. I do not understand how this is lawful in America. I do not understand how anyone can deem this is constitutional. But remember, eugenics was deemed to be constitutional. Forced sterilization is deemed to be constitutional. There's a lot of egregious things that is done that's deemed to be constitutional until it's not, until people, break away and decide that they're going to have a conscience. Okay, so when you're out in public, look at people's teeth, and you'll start to identify when people have dental fluorosis. People have like a brown spot on their teeth. All right, let's move along. I've spent enough on this. CDC data has repeatedly confirmed that over 70% of adolescents in the United States have permanent unsightly defects in their enamel called dental fluorosis. This is a type of disfigurement. The government is literally disfiguring you. Henrico County is literally disfiguring your children. This is a biomarker of systemic overexposure to fluoride during infancy and childhood, with the primary source of exposure being the ingestion of fluoridated tap water. The stains and discoloration lowers the sufferer's confidence and will weaken the enamel, increasing dental decay. It does weaken your enamel. Can you imagine if you're, a woman and you're trying to go be an actress and your teeth are all jacked up like this? Or you're a woman and you're trying to date. You're trying to go out in the dating world and a man sees your teeth are like this. They might think you're on drugs or something, and that's why your teeth are messed up. Or if you're a man and you're trying to get a job or find a girlfriend and your teeth are all messed up, you are embarrassed and you feel shameful. Do not feel shameful. It is not your fault. The government actively harmed you. Turn that shame into outrage towards your government and tell them, stop putting hydrofluorosilicic acid into the drinking water. What right does the government can't legally force you to ingest a multivitamin, but they can put hydrofluorosilicic acid into the drinking water? It's egregious. It's absolutely egregious. They don't actually care about your health. This is not dental health, folks. This is not what dental health looks like. They do not care about you. This is to protect the chemical industry, it's to protect the sugar industry, and it's to make sure that we never have universal dental care. So here, this is again, this is a government NHANES data, I believe. Let's see, we've got, NHANES down here, National Academy of Press, Washington. So here are the sources down here at the bottom, guys. And so this is going to be in 2015, 2016. Look at the rate of dental fluorosis. It just shot up the more and more that you ingest it. It's absolutely outrageous. Tens of millions of children have visible signs of overexposure to fluoride. Let me move this over a little bit. The fluoridation program has notably fallen short of achieving one of its primary objectives, reducing dental decay rates while minimizing a side effect of overexposure to fluoride from ingestion during early childhood development, called dental fluorosis. It is characterized by permanent staining and discoloration of tooth enamel due to fluoride causing alterations in the remineralization process. Initially, the proponents of fluoridation aimed to restrict dental fluorosis in very mild form to only 10%. So in other words, what was happening was a ton of children are having dental fluorosis. They grow into adults with dental fluorosis. And so the government said, okay, let's lower the amount of fluoride that's going to be in the drinking water. So just 10% of American children have jacked up teeth. Now, it didn't actually work because children are being overexposed. We're getting it through toothpaste. We're getting it through mouthwashes. Their mothers are taking their children to get fluoride treatments. It's in our food, it's in our water, it's in our coffee, it's in our tea, it's in our soda pop, it's in our juices. It is everywhere. So the government acknowledged, let's just, ruin 10% of people. That was their goal. They weren't successful. They're ruining everybody. All right, so let's move on. Real world failures have already occurred. You guys know I've talked about this a lot. This is the Richmond fluoride overfeed. The 2025 Richmond fluoride overfeed incident, tens of thousands of pounds of hydrofluorosilicic acid and fluoride levels up to 45 times the target. More than a month's worth of fluoride went into the water in one day. This demonstrates that systems fail. Children are exposed acutely, they're also exposed chronically. Harm is not hypothetical. The so-called optimal level is 0.7 parts per million. The secondary maximum contaminant level is 2 parts per million. The maximum contaminant level is 4 parts per million. Richmond's fluoride overflow that affected Eastern Henrico was estimated to be 114 parts per million during the accident. 65,400 pounds of hydrofluorosilicic acid in 5 hours and 15 minutes. I saw the SCADA data. It happened. It's real, folks. 2 days after the incident, the concentration was at 31.95 parts per million. This is according to the monthly operating report. Richmond signed off on this, and the state health commissioner signed off on that. So that's what I got to go on, folks. May 12th, 2025, notice of alleged violation. If you haven't read it, I encourage you to read it. It's terrifying. Following a federal court ruling finding fluoridation to present an unreasonable risk, the continued recommendation and implementation of fluoridation reflects a reckless disregard for public health. There is no reason why the county should be risking our health with this. There's no excuse. There's just no justification, especially after the Richmond fluoride overfeed. I mean, this is just gross negligence, willful indifference. I mean, I don't know. There's not enough words in the English dictionary for me to describe how awful this is. In April 2025, a catastrophic overfeed event resulted in more than a month's worth of fluoride being introduced into the drinking water supply within a matter of hours, impacting residents in eastern Henrico. Despite the known risks associated with fluoride overexposure, Henrico continues to support and maintain its fluoridation practice. They defended Richmond's fluoride program. They defended what happened. They still support fluoride. It's egregious. They still support Richmond putting fluoride in the drinking water, exposing people in eastern Henrico to Lord knows how much fluoride at various times throughout the day and throughout the month. In the wake of this incident, the county failed both to safeguard the public and to adequately inform affected residents of the nature, extent, and potential health implications of the overfeed. This constitutes a clear failure of duty and reflects reckless indifference to the health and safety of its water consumers. I warned Henrico County that fluoride overfeeds occur and how catastrophic it is. I warned them, I was beating the drum, and they rolled their eyes at me. And then the fluoride overflow occurred, and they never clearly articulated to the public what they were exposed to and what the possible adverse health events were. They did not inform them. They just did nothing, right? And they continue to support this. This is, in my opinion, reckless indifference. This is my opinion, folks. Based on my research, I believe that this is extremely reckless, and I'm allowed to feel that putting hydrofluorosilicic acid, a recycled hazardous waste byproduct that says poison on the package, is reckless, right? I think it is reckless. Both Virginia law and the Safe Drinking Water Act imposes an obligation on public water systems to protect public health and provide accurate, timely information regarding contaminants and incidents affecting drinking water quality. Henrico's failure to do so violates both the spirit and intent of these requirements. Henrico owes a duty of care to its residents, including children who are particularly vulnerable to overexposure. Under Virginia law, abuse or neglected child includes a child whose caregiver, by willful or act or omission, creates or inflicts a substantial risk of physical harm. Well, when you use the waterworks as a mechanism to mass medicate, you are risking children's health. This is an unnecessary risk. It is not reasonable to use the waterworks as a way to give drugs to the public. It's just not. To the extent Henrico knowingly maintained, supported, and defended a practice involving recognized risks and failure to warn or protect the public following a significant overfeed event, such conduct raises serious concerns under that standard. The county's continued disregard of known risks coupled with its failure to provide full and transparent disclosure following a significant contamination event demonstrates a knowing and willful breach of its duty of care. That is how I feel, and I am allowed to feel that way towards my government. When they are putting a recycled hazardous waste byproduct that comes from the phosphate industry that's contaminated with things like lead and mercury and cadmium and arsenic and God knows whatever other type of heavy metals into the drinking water that says, warning, poison, do not ingest, I am allowed to feel that this is reckless. It's absolutely reckless. And Henrico County has a duty of care to protect children with the water. All right. It's just outrageous. It's just absolutely outrageous. So here's what happened with the Richmond overfeed incident on it was April 23rd, I believe, 2025. So you have the target amount, right? 0.7 parts per million. Richmond actually usually keeps it under 0.7 because their ordinance, I think, says they're going to do whatever the health department says. The health department says do 0.7. So they make sure, usually, they make sure to try to never go over 0.7. So several days after the incident, the monthly operating report said it was at 31.95 parts per million. And during the incident, like I said, mathematical models show that it would have been upwards of 114 parts per million. Could have been even worse if only one or two localities got all of the fluoride, as opposed to it being distributed across all 4 localities. They don't know where the fluoride went. Okay, they don't know if Richmond got the majority. They don't know if Henrico got all of it. They don't know if Chesterfield got all of it. They don't know where it went. So if just Henrico got the majority of it, it would have been even upwards of 114 parts per million. It would have been over that, according to mathematical models. Okay, so let's move on to the next image. Again, we've got April 23rd, 2025, 65,400 pounds of hydrofluorosilicic acid solution. It's roughly 6,431 gallons. All right, so here we go. This is what it normally is, and woo! I mean, and how idiotic is it? This isn't about health. This isn't reasonable. This isn't healthy. Hydrofluorosilicic acid is not a nutrient. This does not promote health. There's no such thing as a hydrofluorosilicic acid deficiency. That's like saying that there's, a cholesterol drug deficiency. It just doesn't happen, okay? Or an aspirin deficiency. There's no such thing as an aspirin deficiency. There's no such thing as a lead deficiency. There's no such thing as a hydrofluorosilicic acid deficiency, folks. This is not a nutrient that promotes health. All right. So we've got a legal authority. This is going to be Dillon's Rule and ultravirus conduct. So under the well-established principles of Dillon's Rule, local governments in Virginia possess only those powers that are expressly granted by the General Assembly, necessarily or fairly implied from expressly granted powers, or essential and indispensable to the declared purpose of the locality. In other words, Henrico County can only do what there needs to be a state law where the General Assembly expressly granted Henrico County to put fluoride in the drinking water. There is no law that expressly granted any locality in Virginia to put fluoride in the drinking water. Is there a law where it was necessarily or fairly implied? No, guys, there is no law where it was necessarily or fairly implied that Henrico County has the legal authority to put fluoride in the drinking water. Is there a law that says it is essential? In other words, we have laws regarding pure water. So is fluoride essential to use in order to get pure water, in order to achieve the pure water goal? No, it is not. Okay, so it's not essential. Fluoride is not essential. And there is no law that says it's necessarily or fairly implied. And there is no law expressly granting Henrico the authority to put it in the drinking water. If there's no law, I believe that makes the act illegal. But that's the controversy, folks. That's the controversy. That's what we're going to have a judge figure out. Any reasonable doubt concerning the existence of a power must be resolved against the locality. That's how you apply Dillon's rule. And Virginia loves using Dillon's rule, so we're pretty strict about this one over here, folks. Henrico County appears to be operating under the mistaken belief that a waterworks permit mentioning fluoridation automatically makes the practice lawful. It does not. A permit cannot create legal authority where none exist. It can only regulate activities that are already authorized by the law. So one time, Bentley Chan, I said, why do you think you have the legal authority to do this? And he said, well, we have a waterworks permit. And I'm like, just because you have a waterworks permit doesn't magically make this lawful. Okay, it just does not. Not by any stretch of the imagination. Even VDH doesn't say, yeah, if Henrico has a waterworks permit, then yeah, that's good enough. That means it's lawful. VDH doesn't even support that nonsense. So to lawfully add fluoride to the public drinking water supply, the county must be able to point to clear state statutory authority, along with an ordinance and a justification grounded in that authority. You also need to have ethics. It also needs to be in line with the Constitution. It also can't be arbitrary and capricious, okay? But this is the gist. Without such elements, reliance on a permit alone is insufficient. So again, to lawfully add fluoride to the public water supply, the county must be able to point to clear state statutory authority, along with an ordinance and a valid justification grounded in that authority. Without such elements, reliance on the permit alone is insufficient. By adding fluoride to the public drinking water without any express statutory authorization or duly enacted local ordinance, Henrico County is acting ultra vires beyond the scope of the powers granted by the Virginia General Assembly. Any such unauthorized action is invalid and unenforceable under Virginia law. That is what I'm arguing. That is the controversy. In Henrico County, I said, provide me the statutory authority. And they say, we don't have any statutory authority. We don't have a law that we're relying upon. If the county is relying on administrative recommendations, agency guidance, or general public health objectives as justification, such reliance is insufficient under Dillon's rule, absent a clear legislative grant of authority. Administrative regulations cannot independently confer power upon a locality that have not been granted by statute. Okay, that is how it works. All right. So I think that is a good place to leave it off for today, and we will pick it up next time on unlawful expenditure of taxpayer fun. So we're going to pick up on page 43. So that is it for today, guys. If you like this video, make sure to give a thumbs up, leave a comment below, and share it with somebody else. So I will see you next time. Thanks for joining me on this water fluoridation investigation. Bye, guys.